Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Leroy Jackson. I'm 29, a delivery driver, and an invisible man in my own family. I know that sounds dramatic, but spend one dinner at my parents' house, and you'd understand. In their eyes, I've always just been the other one. The extra mouth, the spare wheel, the shadow of my little brother, Brandon. Brandon is 3 years younger than me but carries the family name like it's a crown. He's got the smile, the charm, the smooth-talking gift that lets him walk into a room and own it. Me. I work 12-hour shifts in a dented white delivery truck, trying to make rent while my parents ask if I've thought about doing something more meaningful with my life. They say it with that soft voice. You know the kind. Like they're helping you. But it cuts deep. Tonight, like every other Friday, I was asked to come home for dinner. Mom's texts were more like summons. Be home by 6. Brandon has big news. Not a, how are you? Not a, hope work went okay. Just a reminder that I was expected to clap on cue for Brandon's latest life update. I was tired. My back ached from lifting boxes all day. The last package I delivered was to a woman who tipped me a crumpled dollar and said, "God bless you for working so hard." That meant more to me than any praise my family's ever given me. Still, I showed up. The house hadn't changed. The same chipped white paint, same cracked driveway. The same creaky steps that groaned under my feet like they didn't want me there either. Inside, the smell of roast chicken filled the air. Mom was fluttering around the kitchen like a waitress in a 5-star restaurant, except all the attention was on one table, Brandon's. He sat there in a suit jacket, hair slicked back, grinning like a CEO about to go public. "Leroy," he beamed. "You made it." I nodded. "Yeah. I always do." Mom handed Brandon a full plate, then turned to me. "You can serve yourself, honey. The salad's in the fridge." That's how it always was. Brandon got the silver spoon. I got the Tupperware. Dinner was just background noise for Brandon's show. He talked about his new startup, a crypto trading platform. He said words like blockchain and decentralized finance, while Dad nodded like he understood. I stayed quiet, chewing my food like it was sand. Then he dropped it, the surprise. "Actually, I've got a big opportunity coming up. A new investor. Real big shot. And I might be expanding soon." Mom gasped. "Oh, sweetheart. You're always going places." I swallowed hard, bitter taste rising in my throat. Then Brandon looked at me and said, "Actually, big bro, I could use a favor." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind?" He smiled. "Nothing much. Just help me drop something off tomorrow. It's a small box. You're always driving around anyway, right?" The table went quiet. I knew better. But I also knew how it would look if I said no. Mom would say I was being difficult. Dad would grunt disapprovingly. So I said, "Sure." One word. That's all it took. And I signed my life away. I should have trusted my gut. That night, after dinner, I lay in my tiny rented room staring at the ceiling fan creaking above me. The hum of city traffic filtered through the cracked window. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to Brandon's words. Just a small box. You're always driving around anyway. There was something about the way he said it. Too casual. Too smooth. Like he was rehearsed. By morning, I still hadn't gotten a full hour of rest. But I showed up, like I always did. Punctual. Reliable. The good son they never praised. When I arrived at my parents' place, Brandon was already waiting on the porch. He handed me a box sealed in brown paper. No return label. No markings. Just an address scribbled on the front. He didn't say much, just smiled and said, "You're a lifesaver." I should have asked more questions. But I didn't. I tossed the package into the back of my delivery van and went about my regular route. At around 3 p.m., just as I was finishing my second-to-last delivery, 2 unmarked black SUVs pulled up behind me. Fast. Precise. Like a trap being sprung. I stepped out and heard it. Leroy Jackson, hands where we can see them. Guns were drawn. People were watching from the sidewalk. And me, the guy who never even got a parking ticket, was slammed face-first against my own van. "What is this?" I yelled, but they didn't answer. An officer opened the back of the van and within seconds, he pulled out the box. Tore it open. Inside? Vacuum-sealed packets. White powder. A lot of it. One officer turned to me and said coldly, "You're under arrest for possession and intent to distribute." I couldn't even breathe. I tried to explain, tried to say it wasn't mine. That I didn't know. But all they saw was a delivery driver with a van full of packages and a kilo of cocaine. At the station, they grilled me for 6 hours. Same questions. Over and over. Where did the package come from? Who gave it to you? Are you working alone? When I told them it came from my brother, Brandon Jackson, their eyes narrowed like I'd said the magic word. One of them muttered something to the other and left the room. The next time they returned, their tone had changed. "We spoke to your parents," one of them said. I straightened. Finally. They'd clear things up. They'd tell the truth. My mom, my dad, they'd say this was all a mistake, right? Wrong. They said they have no knowledge of Brandon giving you anything, the cop continued. They say you've been under financial stress. That you've been acting strange. That you might have done something reckless. I felt my heart shatter in my chest. My own parents. I sat there in that freezing interrogation room while they laid it out, the charges, the sentence I was looking at, and the bail I couldn't afford. They tossed a court-appointed lawyer at me like a bandage on a stab wound. The guy met me for 5 minutes before the arraignment and said, "Best you plead out." 2 years. Could have been worse. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab someone by the collar and make them see, I wasn't the criminal. But nobody listened. Not the judge. Not the lawyer. Not even my family. I took the deal. Because what else was I going to do? Sit in jail for a year just waiting for a trial I couldn't win? 2 years. 2 years for a crime I didn't commit. The day they transferred me to state prison, I waited for someone, anyone, to show up. Just to say goodbye. To say they believed me. But no one came. No calls. No letters. Not from Brandon. Not from Mom. Not from Dad. It was like I died and they moved on. Inside those prison walls, time stretched like elastic. The lights were too bright. The food tasted like cardboard. And the nights? They were endless. I was jumped once, by a guy who thought I was a rival dealer. I had to explain through a bloody nose that I wasn't in the game. That I didn't even know how this world worked. No one cared. Everyone in there was either lying, surviving, or forgotten. And I guess I was all three. But rock bottom has a funny way of showing you the truth. One night, 6 months into my sentence, I sat in the corner of the rec yard, cold metal bench under me, notebook in my lap. That's when I met Curtis, an old-timer with sharp eyes and a limp. "You don't belong here," he said, studying me. "No," I replied. "But here I am." He nodded like he understood too well. "You got played," he said. "And if you don't wake up, they'll keep playing you for the rest of your life." I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't need to. He could see it in me. The defeat. The hurt. The betrayal. "You got a family?" he asked. "Not anymore." Curtis didn't say anything for a while. Then he looked at me and said words I'd never forget. "Then you need to stop living for them and start fighting for you." That night, I made a decision. If no one was going to save me, then I would save myself. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to come back stronger. And they'd regret ever thinking I was the disposable son. Prison didn't kill me, it sharpened me. The first few months were hell, yeah. But after meeting Curtis, something in me changed. I started watching people differently. Listening more. Asking questions. Not just about survival, but about justice. Curtis had been an accountant for a gang back in the 90s. Knew numbers like a second language. And one day, he slid a beat-up paperback across the table to me in the library. "This book'll teach you more than any lawyer you'll ever meet," he said. It was a legal primer. Basic case law, trial structure, and, what really caught my eye, how to track financial fraud. He didn't just give me a book. He gave me a weapon. Every day after that, I read. Took notes. Asked Curtis to explain things I didn't understand. He told me how money moves, how corporations can be shells, how criminals hide behind fake businesses. And with every page, my mind kept going back to Brandon. The fancy clothes. The vague crypto company. The sealed box. The phone calls he'd step outside to take during dinner. His sudden wealth, despite having no clear job. I remembered a name he casually mentioned at the table one night, JM Solutions. At the time, I thought it was one of those startup names everyone throws around. Now I wasn't so sure. I wrote it down in my notebook, along with every other breadcrumb I could remember. That black hoodie he wore the night of the bust. The way Mom avoided eye contact when the police arrived. How Dad muttered, "Just cooperate," under his breath. They all knew. They didn't just turn their backs on me. They handed me over. Curtis saw me fuming one night and said, "You want payback? Don't yell. Build your case. People like your brother, they're sloppy with money. Money always leaves a trail." He taught me how to read shell company structures. How to look up business registrations, spot unusual transactions, and map relationships between names and accounts. We started drawing a map in my journal, my revenge ledger, he called it. A handwritten spiderweb of everything I could remember about Brandon's crypto startup. One name kept popping up, Rico. I remembered hearing it in the backyard once, Brandon saying, "Tell Rico I'll handle it." It wasn't a nickname. It was a connection. Curtis looked uneasy when I mentioned it. "Rico's not just a name," he said slowly. "It's also the name of the law that takes people like your brother down. RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The law they use to bring down entire criminal empires. Drug rings. Mob families. And, apparently, tech-savvy punks pretending to be crypto CEOs. That's when it clicked. Brandon wasn't just greedy. He was laundering money, likely for people far worse than he could ever pretend to be. I spent the next 6 months doing what nobody outside would expect from a prisoner. I studied. I planned. I wrote letters to myself, coded notes about Brandon's accounts, dates, phrases he used, and people he mentioned. One day, Curtis brought me a page torn from a smuggled newspaper. Crypto King Brandon Jackson launches bold new venture in downtown Portland. There was a photo. Brandon, standing next to a luxury car, smiling for cameras like the golden boy he'd always been. The caption read, "Rising star Brandon Jackson aims to disrupt the financial world with his startup, JM Ventures." I wanted to scream. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't even laying low. He was celebrating. I showed Curtis the article. He read it in silence, then handed it back. "You ready to bury him?" he asked. I nodded. Not just for me. But for every time he lied and smiled in my face. For every letter my parents didn't send. For the cold metal cuffs. The courtroom silence. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice. You know what they don't teach you in school? How to weaponize pain. But prison does. Especially when you're surrounded by men who have nothing left to lose, men like Curtis. And men like me. After seeing that photo of Brandon in the newspaper, all shiny suit and snake oil smile, I knew I couldn't just move on. He wasn't just living free. He was building an empire, on the very bones of the life he stole from me. And my parents? Silent. That was the final nail. So I committed myself to one mission. Take him down. Legally. Thoroughly. Quietly. And when he looked around, wondering how his world fell apart, I wanted him to know it was me. Curtis became more than a mentor, he became a partner. We mapped everything. The dates of Brandon's big launches. The timeline of my arrest. The names mentioned around the dinner table. Crypto transaction patterns Curtis taught me to trace using publicly visible blockchain ledgers. It was all connected. Brandon, I had to stop softening it, had built a financial shell game. JM Ventures was registered under his name, but the investors listed in state filings. Sketchy at best. Some with criminal pasts. Some tied to known laundering schemes. Curtis taught me how to pull tax ID numbers from public filings, how to check for federal business registrations, and how to track movement of cryptocurrency wallets, especially when the money flowed in, disappeared, then reappeared in offshore accounts. A few key tools were available even from inside prison, through legal request forms, paper records, and public library mail access. Slow, sure. But Curtis knew the system inside and out. We discovered 3 offshore accounts tied to Brandon's company, one in the Cayman Islands, another in Dubai, and the third, most damning of all, in Panama, flagged in a 2022 financial probe. And that name I remembered. Rico. Curtis smiled darkly when I said it again. Brandon's not laundering for himself. He's just the face. The money's not his, it's someone else's. Probably cartel-linked or worse. And suddenly, it all made sense. Why Brandon was nervous that last dinner. Why Mom said, "You're stronger." Why no one fought when I was arrested. They didn't just want to protect Brandon. They were terrified of who he was protecting. That realization sobered me. This wasn't a petty family betrayal. This was life or death, for them, for me. And still, I couldn't stop. By my final 6 months in prison, I had built a full profile on Brandon's operations. Investor names and flagged aliases. Blockchain wallet addresses. Shell companies connected to JM Ventures. Date-stamped activity reports. Transcripts of audio I remembered from the yard when Brandon used to take shady calls behind the house. Curtis helped me turn it all into a dossier. A thick, stapled packet with everything documented, organized, and sourced from public records. It wasn't perfect, but it was real enough to raise red flags. Now, I needed the exit plan. My release date was creeping up, and I made a promise to myself. Don't walk out angry. Walk out ready. The week before my release, Curtis pulled me aside during yard time. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. "Yeah." He nodded. "Good. Just don't get loud. You win this in silence. Let the truth be the blade." I folded the dossier into an envelope. I already had the address of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the Portland DEA office, and Oregon State Securities Regulator. My plan was simple. Once I was out, I'd create a burner email, scan everything into a PDF, and send it with a tip-off note. No names. No trail. Let the wolves find Brandon. Release day came like a whisper. No one was there to pick me up. Just me, my old hoodie, and a notebook of revenge tucked in my bag. I didn't need a ride. I needed a laptop. Within 72 hours of getting out, I'd scanned every page, anonymized my metadata, and sent the file to every agency I could think of. No fanfare. No dramatic message. Just. I believe this startup, JM Ventures, is engaged in interstate money laundering and crypto fraud. Please see attached. Then I shut the laptop. And waited. They say revenge is best served cold. But I learned something else. It's even better served quietly. The week after I hit send on those anonymous emails, I went back to work. Nothing fancy, just a barista gig at a small coffee shop called Ground Up off Belmont Street. Most customers didn't even look me in the eye when I handed them lattes. And that was fine. I liked being invisible. Because while I was frothing milk and wiping tables, the noose around Brandon's neck was slowly tightening. It started with whispers. Crypto blogs and small-time financial forums began posting anonymous tips. JM Ventures showing irregular wallet transfers. Another Portland startup suspected of moving funds offshore. CEO Brandon Jackson, too fast, too flashy. I sat in my apartment every night, scrolling through my laptop, watching my plan unfold like a slow-burning fuse. Then one day, it exploded. Breaking, JM Ventures under federal investigation for financial misconduct. There it was. In bold. Front page of the Oregonian. I nearly dropped my coffee. The article cited an anonymous whistleblower who'd provided blockchain ledgers, bank registrations, and investor links to known traffickers. My dossier. Brandon didn't even know what hit him. He tried to act cool in the interviews, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But the federal agencies weren't buying it. Within 72 hours, the IRS froze all JM Ventures accounts. Then the DEA showed up. I never said a word to my parents. Didn't call. Didn't visit. I knew they were watching the same news, praying it would go away. But it didn't. Instead, Brandon's glossy empire began to fall apart piece by piece. Investors sued him for fraud. The office he rented in downtown Portland was exposed as a P.O. box with no staff. A leaked report showed over $1.2 million in anonymous crypto had vanished into offshore wallets with no tax record. And then, came the arrest. Tuesday, 9:41 a.m. Brandon Jackson was taken into custody by federal agents outside of a yoga studio. He was wearing that same smug grin I remembered from our last family dinner. Until the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The news broke fast. TV stations played it on loop. Crypto CEO caught in web of lies. Portland man accused of laundering drug money through startup. I sat in the corner booth of a quiet diner and watched it with a black coffee in hand. He looked so small on that screen. 2 days later, I got a text. Not from Brandon. Not from my parents. From a number I didn't recognize. Jacob, is this you? We need to talk. Please. It's your mother. I let the phone buzz until the screen dimmed. Let them squirm. For 2 years I waited behind bars. 2 birthdays. 2 Christmases. And not one damn visit. Now they could wait. But what came next? That shook even me. Turns out the name, Rico, wasn't just a whisper from the past, it was tied to a real person. A man already under DEA surveillance for trafficking fentanyl across state lines. And Brandon? He wasn't just laundering for him. He owed him. That's what the court docs revealed. A $300,000 debt Brandon took out with dirty money to start JM Ventures. And when it failed, Rico gave him one last chance. Move a package. That package? The one Brandon handed to me. The one that got me locked away. He used me not just to dodge a conviction. He used me to stay alive. And my parents? They knew. They thought sacrificing me would save him. But Rico doesn't forget. He doesn't care about family dinners or golden children. When Brandon got arrested, he lost everything, including his protection. And from what I heard through a mutual friend in county jail, Rico was furious. I didn't celebrate. Not like I thought I would. I didn't throw a party or laugh in the mirror. I just sat in silence. A silence that felt heavier than any cell I'd been locked in. Because now, I wasn't just a man wronged. I was a man holding the truth like a loaded gun. And I had one final shot to fire. The phone kept buzzing. Unknown number. Blocked caller. Mom. I ignored them all, until one night, curiosity got the better of me. I answered. It was my father. His voice, once so steady and full of authority, now cracked like an old vinyl record. Leroy, we need your help. I almost hung up right there. But then he said something that made me sit up straight. They're threatening your mother. Brandon made a deal with the wrong people. And now they think we still have the money. For a few seconds, I didn't say anything. I just stared at the ceiling of my studio apartment while Dad kept talking, desperation bleeding through every word. They came to the house, Leroy. Pounded on the door last night. Said Brandon owes interest. Said we better pay, or we're next. So that was it. All those years of worshipping Brandon, of pretending he was some visionary leader, they never realized they were just sitting on a ticking bomb. And now it had gone off. I said nothing for a long moment. Then. Where's Brandon now? Dad hesitated. He's in federal holding. Refused protective custody. Of course he did. Arrogant to the end. But what stunned me most, what chilled me deeper than I expected, was how afraid they sounded. The same people who let me rot. Who called me stronger like it was a reason to be sacrificed. Now they wanted me to save them. That night, I opened my prison notebook. The one filled with every piece of evidence, transaction, and thread I'd pulled over the last 18 months. And on the back page, something I hadn't looked at in a while. An address. It wasn't Brandon's. It wasn't Rico's. It was my mother's sister, Aunt Naomi, the only family member who ever wrote to me while I was inside. One short letter. They made a mistake. You didn't deserve that. You need a place when you get out. I got one. I never followed up. Never replied. But now. I needed answers. The next day, I drove 2 hours north and knocked on her door. She opened it slowly, then froze when she saw me. Leroy? I nodded. She let me in without a word. The house smelled like jasmine and coffee. There were photos of cousins on the mantel I hadn't seen since I was 10. We sat down in the kitchen. She poured tea. And then she said something that shattered me. Your mother knew about Brandon's debts 2 years before you went to prison. My jaw tightened. She continued, voice low. He came to the family begging for help. Said he borrowed money from some guys overseas. Said he just needed time. Your parents were terrified he'd be killed. So they made a plan. I didn't say a word. Just listened. They agreed to help him launder a few packages. Small things. Said it would buy him time. Your dad even pulled some strings to keep the cops off his back at first. But when the big delivery came, when it couldn't be dodged anymore, they panicked. I already knew what was coming. But hearing it out loud felt like swallowing glass. So they chose you. That night, I sat alone in a roadside motel. The rain tapped against the windows like it wanted to get in. The notebook lay open in front of me. Every note, every diagram, every transaction stared back at me like scars I couldn't erase. They chose me. They didn't just abandon me. They sacrificed me. Willingly. And now they wanted me to help clean up the mess Brandon left behind. I closed the notebook. Then I flipped it over, and began a new page. I wrote 2 letters. One to the IRS task force currently prosecuting Brandon. The other to the DEA agent whose name had appeared in the JM Ventures case files. Both letters said the same thing. There's more. The family was involved. They knew. They facilitated the drop. They kept it quiet. Attached are my notes. I didn't send them yet. But I kept them sealed and ready, just in case. Because the twist wasn't just that my parents framed me. The twist was that they were never victims. They were accomplices. Willing. Silent. And now, terrified. A week later, Mom called again. This time, I answered. She was crying. They broke our front window last night. I don't know what to do. I let her cry. I let the sobs echo across the line. Then I said, calmly. You chose Brandon. Now live with Brandon's choices. And I hung up. There's a moment after betrayal that most people never talk about. It's not the heartbreak. Not the rage. Not even the grief. It's the quiet. That hollow, weightless moment when you realize you've survived. And that survival isn't enough anymore. You want justice. Not courtroom justice. Poetic justice. The kind they'll remember every time they try to sleep at night. Brandon was convicted 2 months later. Federal court. 14 counts. Wire fraud. Money laundering. Trafficking conspiracy. The news said he'd serve 15 years without parole. The courtroom sketch showed him in a crumpled gray suit, staring at the floor while the judge read the sentence. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. But I heard from someone who was. Brandon looked like a boy who'd finally realized he wasn't special anymore. After the conviction, the vultures came circling. Investors sued for restitution. Rico's people disappeared into the shadows. My parents? They lost everything. Their savings went toward Brandon's defense. The mortgage went unpaid. Eventually, the house, the same house where I was framed, was foreclosed and sold at auction. I drove by one last time, just to see it empty. The porch light was gone. The windows boarded up. The place looked like a corpse. But that's not the end. Because I wasn't done yet. See, I didn't want to ruin them. That was too easy. I wanted them to understand what it meant to be forgotten. Overlooked. Tossed aside. So I opened my cafe. It wasn't fancy. Just a small corner lot off Belmont. Same street as the shop I used to work at. But it had a name that meant something to me. Second Son Coffee. No one asked about it. But I smiled every time I unlocked the door in the morning. Business was slow at first. Then steady. And before long, I had regulars. People who knew me as Leroy, not Brandon's brother. One afternoon, as I wiped down a table, I saw a woman standing outside the window. Thin. Gray hair. Wrinkled hands clenched tightly around her purse. My mother. She stood there for a long time. Didn't come in. Didn't knock. Just stared. Eventually, she turned and walked away. And I let her. 3 months later, I mailed something to the federal facility where Brandon was serving time. It was a single envelope. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of my cafe's opening day article from the Portland Weekly. A photo of me, standing in front of my shop, smiling with a sign that read, "Good coffee. Second chances." On the back, I'd written only one sentence. You took my freedom. So I built something you can never have. I don't know if he ever replied. I didn't check. Didn't care. Because this story wasn't about redemption for them. It was about reclaiming my own name. Now I live alone, but not lonely. Some nights I still hear echoes of the prison, metal doors slamming, Curtis's quiet voice saying, "Let the truth be the blade." He passed away before my release. Cancer. But he left me something more valuable than anything Brandon ever offered. A blueprint for justice. Not revenge out of rage. Justice with precision. I get letters now, from former inmates, customers, even a few local reporters asking for my inspiring comeback story. But I never reply. Because I didn't do this to inspire anyone. I did it to heal. And maybe, to warn. So if you're listening to this, and you feel forgotten, overlooked, sacrificed. Let me tell you something. You are not weak for surviving. You are dangerous because you did. And someday, the people who tried to bury you will realize you were the seed. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.